Hello, good morning.
So, good morning to you, everyone. I hope you had a good night and you've enjoyed the tour around the town. All of you are here for the communication workshop, am I right? Who isn't? Good one. So the room is rather huge in relation to the number of participants. If it's not too much trouble, could I please ask you to come and sit in the front? Maybe the first 3 or 4 rows, if that's all right. Please. This way we'll have a better workshop, I promise. And the speakers will also feel more welcomed and they will experience more warmth. However, if for any reason you really need to stay in the back, then by all means, it's a free country, yeah? C3S is a free organization, right? Thank you very much for your collaboration and understanding. I feel more embraced already. Now, good morning another time. And this workshop is, at least to me, is going to be very interesting because it's about communication in relation to all the great work you do on climate intelligence and climate data. And the way it will look is as follows. We have 3 excellent speakers. The first is Nuria Lopez. She's press communication and she works on press communication and contracts at ECMWF, and she'll talk about how ECMWF approaches communication generally. After her, I'm very excited to have online with us the climate and science reporter of Euronews, Jeremy Wilkes, and he'll talk about the press side of things. And then Eduardo will bridge these 2 things nicely. Eduardo Penabad, he works at C3S and he's a meteorologist. Previously, he also worked in Spain in press and communication. So he has a view on both sides of the story. Each one of them will speak 10 minutes, and I'm very happy that they have promised, and if they haven't, they promise now by nodding, that they will not cross the time limit because we only have an hour. And after that hour, we will split up in 3 groups to have mini workshops on a number of topics that are, I think, quite relevant for communication with regards to the climate and climate change. Now, without further ado, please give Nuria a huge applause.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Ali, and welcome to the communication workshop. Let's see if this works. Presentation coming? No? No, okay, good. So you've seen how some of our colleagues have used some figures to show the great success that C3S had in the media conversation, especially recently. And I wanted to show you this graphic with the evolution of the media mentions of C3S and CAMS since 2018. You see here great numbers, and we have a very recent record of the summer with a coverage of more than 30,000 media mentions over June, July, and August. C3S accounted for more than 12,000 only in July. This is a great success, and we are super happy and satisfied. But I wanted to show you this not only to kind of show off what is, I think, valid, but also to think about the other side of the coin, that is that we have created very, very high expectations. So media, public conversation, I mean like audience, broader public, but also some actors we've been collaborating with recently, like WMO or UN Secretary General. They are expecting us to keep reporting at that level, not only on a monthly basis, annual basis, but maybe also on extreme events. So we need to really take decisions now on what we are going to communicate in and with whom, because that has, of course, stressed the capacity and the resources of our colleagues in the science team, but also in the communication team. And what we need to consider when taking these decisions, well, we contribute for communications from the communication teams to these objectives, not only awareness raising, that you've seen it in the figures of the media coverage, and not only for strengthening thought leadership with this great partnership with having most recently, and specifically with the UN Secretary General, but others too, but also we need to consider that communications helps also to mobilize partnerships, to mobilize resources that we would need in the future to keep functioning, to keep delivering science to society. And another one that I like it very much, but is always forgotten, and is accountability. I think it's important to show to the society that we are giving back because we are using taxpayers' money. And I think that's a nice way to show to the society that we are relevant and useful for them. And this without forgetting that this is our core audience, right? So we have policy and decision makers, the European Union domains, of course. We have international organizations, but also NGOs or associations. And I would say that I forgot to add it here, but also in a way, the media, it's also a kind of audience here. This is the way we organize our communication activities. For all of you that don't know it, it's not as obvious always. We have a small team. We are 4 staff and part-time of a 5th person. And we have 4 communication contractors. We implement the activities through 3 main channels. We have the own channels, so the ones that we can keep control of them. That is the digital, like social media, website, or when we organize events, as this nice one. Then we have the earned media. That is the channels where we have a limited control. We don't have the full control of it. And this is the media relations, public relations, so beyond media, and also when we attend to external events. And then we have paid channels. We have like media partnerships, like the one that we hold with Euronews or CNN. And this is a very tough work for us because it's a lot of channels where we need to keep consistency, we need to keep coherence in terms of branding, in terms of tone, of messaging. And on top of this, that I did not put it here, but we always need to find the balance between the mandate of the European Commission, Copernicus program, and the EC and WF. So I've been listening to many ideas these days about how we can innovate in communication approaches. And this is great and welcome, but we always need to keep in mind that we need to comply with these mandates and these roles of these 2 organizations. And there is something I wanted to highlight here because it's not common to other contracts that are here. And it's that in communications, we have to cope with uncertainty a lot because we have to react to the context. When we have an extreme event, we have heat waves, we have wildfires. This means that we cannot always tell you how many deliverables and when they are going to be delivered over the contract. And that's why in planning for us is so important. We need to minimize risk and to have as much control as we have. And we need to take as much decisions as we can as early as possible because we need to try to maximize the amount of resources that we need to face these unexpected questions that come up in the context. And this is in the context. And this is not always understood, for example, in terms of imagine organizing an event and having to scout for a venue very well in advance. And this is just to show that we are in constant dialogue with the colleagues, specifically with C3S, but other colleagues too, throughout all our implementation or planning meetings, as I guess most of you do too over the year. And then I wanted to pay attention to the European State of the Climate Report communication efforts, because I know that many of you know the report, but maybe not all of you are aware of the communication activities that implies. So usually it takes 6 months planning. I think this year is going to be even longer. And 1 month tail, that means that after the release of the report, we have to continue still the communication activities. And this work is very nice because we work very hand in hand with the science team. So science and communication are in a constant dialogue and coordination. And also I wanted to stress the importance that planning overlaps execution. So while we are implementing, we are delivering, we keep planning. There is something we need to do beforehand, and it's an assessment of the content. We need to consider potential negative and positive drivers that might affect the welcome of the report. For example, the last year, WMO was releasing their report the following day to our launch. And that puts a bit of pressure because this could take over the conversation. And also, we could put at risk a bit, like we need to be consistent with all the reports in the landscape. So that was something that needed to be really very well considered. And then following this strategic assessment, then we have in parallel all the collection of inputs and the publication process, which is super complicated, very exciting, but very complicated. Not only all the contractors involved, but all the colleagues involved in the organization who are providing inputs and who are involved in the peer review processes. The communication plan, as I said beforehand, runs in parallel with the publication plan and implies like other plans. So we have the content plan that is a kind of written and visual. This content is produced for all our channels. Social media, website, press, media partners. And then we need to distribute that content, right? We need to promote it. We need to place it to the public. So then it comes to the digital plan, where we consider all the different media channels, but we have 4 different media channels: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and each channel works in a different way. So we need to really adapt the messaging and the content to that. Then we have our website, and also that comes with additional inputs, because that is what we show really a longer, more deeper information. And then we have the event plan that changes if the event is fully virtual, fully on-site, or if it's a hybrid one, right? And then we have the press plan. That is also a very long process because it starts with planning the press briefing, then also to consider the very careful writing of the press release, to follow up with all journalists, and also even to consider additional channels, paid channels, as for example, a collaboration with Politico or Parliament magazine or the like. And then we have the content production for the media partnerships, as mainly, like in this case, Euronews. So you see it's quite complicated. And I will not stop a lot here because I know Carlo had showed already this graphic with the evolution of the uptake of the report, what it's been great, and it's a great team up work with all the stakeholders. That's something that we are very proud of it. But wanted to stop more in the remaining seconds in this table. I just wanted you to see that there is a big evolution of the uptake of the topics of the report. And not only because we managed to kind of deliver, to position the messages from the communication team. No, it's because the context is changing a lot. The media outlets, the journalists are much better to digest the scientific information. There is more appetite to put the information, the scientific information forward. And also I would say that it is because the audience is welcoming it and is able to, or trying to understand it and to digest it. So thank you very much for your attention. I think we are almost in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nuria. Jeremy, are you with us?
Hello?
Ah, there you are. You're behind me. Can you hear us clearly, Jeremy?
I can hear you very well, thank
Excellent.
you.
We're happy you're making time to address us. Would you like an applause? You usually don't get that on Euronews, I think.
No, it's fine. Nuria should get an applause. The 4.5 people do an amazing job, I think, is my conclusion from that presentation, having watched that. Nuria, I didn't know it was 4.5. I'm wondering what the other half does. It's the basic picture at the moment, the landscape, which you can see from those numbers, is that media organizations love Copernicus. They want to talk to you and to hear your views. They want to hear your facts. They want to hear your data, and they like talking about you and citing you in their stories. As you said, there are high expectations now. But when we started the first meeting I went to on our media partnership back in 2019, I think, early in 2019, the clear goal from Copernicus was to become known from the Copernicus Climate Change Service, and that has happened. And that's great. That's clearly happening. But as you say, there's a very high expectation there in place. So I make this program Climate Now in association with Copernicus Climate Change Service, monthly show talking about climate change. We really focus on 3 types of stories. We talk about adaptation stories in Europe. We talk about, so that might be things like adapting to heat waves in Greece. That's been one of our most popular stories this year. We might look at stories on climate change impacts. Another story which has been doing very well is a story about invasive ants, which we produced here in our home city of Lyon. We have another invasive ant story that was just published in the last couple of days, also doing very well. And the third kind of story is one really about the sort of how do we know what we know, showing the science as it happens. So how do you measure CO2 in the atmosphere? Next week, I'm going to be reporting from Sweden on methane. How do we understand methane emissions from natural environments? So those are the kinds of stories that we do. And we go on the ground, we meet people, and we talk to people in Europe to show that climate change is happening. If I wind back a little bit, I think it's interesting to get a bit of perspective. I've been in the news business since the mid-1990s. At that time, climate change was difficult to get on the news agenda. It was environmental stories in general were the last story maybe in a bulletin, and they would get bumped off if some celebrity did something interesting. They were not necessarily taken enormously seriously by newsrooms unless it was a big environmental disaster that happened in their garden. They didn't pay an awful lot of attention to it. I think also at the time, climate change in general was seen as a kind of debate, and journalists love debates and they would look for debate. And of course, remember that a lot of journalists in general newsrooms, like the one that I work in, come from a world of politics where there's always 2 sides and they're always looking for angles, trying to poke holes in press releases. And that carried on for a very long time, I think, well into the 2000s. There's been an evolution in the coverage of climate change because, for example, I think that the big turning point was probably with Paris in 2015, not only because we had a great story to tell, but actually because the organizers did a good job of allowing us to tell the story, because my colleagues who went to Copenhagen said it was a fiasco. We know it was a bit of a political stitch-up. It wasn't a great success, but Paris it had a good story curve to it. It had a clear kind of emotional story and a clear kind of climate story at the end of it. And then I think in the last few years, we see climate change impacts here in Europe, which are beginning to hit people where they are in their country, in their region. And so news journalists start to see those stories and they're looking for certainty. So where do they go for certainty? They go to the Copernicus Climate Change Service. That's now you're kind of the reference people. One of the reasons for that is that you're reactive in the way that some of the other large organizations aren't. If you write an email, general email to the IPCC, good luck getting an answer. Copernicus, they answer the phone, they answer emails, and you're quick. And that's really what we need in the news business. I want to dig into what the audiences want, because I think it's interesting to give you some insight. I've been looking at some of our audience data. On TV, we're reaching, according to the data that I have, 20 million people per week. And our top 12 countries in terms of biggest brand reach, Portugal, Ireland, Turkey, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Spain, Poland, France, Belgium, the UK, and Sweden. Our website is doing very well, and our Euronews green page, which is where the Climate Now program sits, is doing very well as well. Overall, Euronews.com has about 32 million unique visitors per month, and the app is a lot lower. It's about 500,000, but I recommend using the app. I think it's great. The main visitors are coming from Germany, France, the USA, Italy, the UK, Turkey, and the main languages in terms of our audience are English, German, Spanish, French, Persian, and Arabic. We do produce content in Persian. It does very well. We have got a great team working on that. Same goes for Arabic. Social media, we've got about 27 million fans across all of the different accounts from all of the different languages. When you look at the world of green stories, people are particularly interested in renewable energy. We see a huge success of stories about solar power. It is really a top tag. It is the top tag for all things environmental and green. And in terms of average page views, we're around about 19,000 or more for anything with solar power in it. So people are interested in that. They're interested in solutions, innovations in batteries. Something we've also discovered is that our audiences really like comparisons between countries on green goals. So some of the Green Deal goals related to renewables or, for example, transport systems or greenhouse gas emission reduction. They like to see comparisons between different countries. How are they faring? How's my country doing compared to the one that's next door? They like free and low-cost public transport schemes. Everybody does, I suppose, but stories about how it worked in Luxembourg, the rail card in Germany, the one that's going to happen in France, are trending and doing well for us. And as Nuria mentioned, in general, topical weather issues like El Nino are really hot for us as well. People want to have explainers. They want to understand why something happened. So they want to get insights and get behind the kind of headline story. And that's where information from Copernicus can come in and be very helpful. Graphs and charts and maps are very helpful. Figures that we can mention in our reports are helpful. At the moment, for example, a interview that one of my colleagues conducted with Adam Scaife talking about the effects of El Nino over the coming months is one of the hottest stories that we have. And that's interesting because people are curious. They're curious to learn more and they want to feel smart, which is natural. If we just look through the tags, as I said, we can see solar power is leading the field. People want to know about renewable energy and wind energy. Extreme weather is the next one down. I think that it's clearly trending. In general, people want to understand what that means for them in Europe, where they are. Heat wave is another key trend. And after that, yeah, it's the rest of the stories that people are curious about, the sorts of things that you would expect them to be. It's, what's happening in where I live. So, for example, when we look at the top articles from this year, I think our third best article was about the heat wave. And we also have stories about technologies that may or may not work at some point, like hydrogen aircraft that do very well as well. People are curious about future tech, which they think is going to be green and clean. And a story about whether climate change and environmental pollution was going to make penises smaller is also a very popular story. Yeah. I guess some things don't really change. But across different countries, what's interesting is that you can see that people are interested in this. If I look at the top stories in Italian, which I'm looking at now, bad weather. What happened in Slovenia? Of course, it's a neighboring country to Italy. They want to understand what happened there. What happened in France with the heat dome? That's what the Italians are reading about. They're looking at over the fence at the neighbors. If we look at, this is German, same thing here. People are talking about heat waves. That's what they're interested in. They're interested in what happened to Lake Garda when they had a drought there, and you could start to see things that maybe were hidden in the past. Lots of Germans go on holiday there. Same thing. They're looking at the neighbours. It carries on like that. I think there's a overall, however, there is a kind of lack of literacy. I mean, we can over-amp this interest that people have, but I think there's a general lack of literacy and understanding what climate change is and how it works, why it's happening and what it means for me. And that's why people are curious, and that's why they're going back to Copernicus and wanting to learn more, because they feel you're a trusted source. And I don't know exactly necessarily how that's going to evolve into the future. As you say, you've got high expectations to meet, but there's absolutely an appetite for it. And as far as we're concerned, that's great for climate now. We love explaining adaptation. We like talking about that particularly because I think it touches on real things that people can relate to. But moving forward, there's going to be, I think, probably there's always this need for kind of more education. You can't under stress that, and we need to carry on pushing forward with that. And I think the State of the Climate report and the way that's presented now is probably a very good way to communicate about climate change because it's much more accessible than it used to be. It's considerably more accessible than the IPCC reports, which are pretty dense to read, even the executive summaries. And the State of the Climate is, you can understand it. It's kind of quotable. You can see kind of the climate change effects in that report very well because of the way that you've displayed them. And so carry on the good work with that. But as I say, meeting those expectations, as Nuria said, is going to be a challenge, one that we hope we can be part of.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I think you've scared at least half of the room. And thanks a lot for all the excellent insights that you have shared. Our next speaker will be Eduardo. Please give Eduardo a big applause.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. Well, it's great to be here at first thing in the morning on the last day of the General Assembly when the room is buzzing with activity, everybody is well awake and really looking forward to it. So thinking about that and thinking that we are in the context of a comms workshop, I thought that I would try to go to a slightly lighter approach to some slides. So you might be wondering if you are still in the General Assembly with this picture there, and yes, we are. In 1970, in Encino, Los Angeles, California, the well-known musician Sergio Mendes, Brazilian musician, was rebuilding his recording studio, and he had to hire a crew of carpenters for that. So that moment in time, that story, led me to think if Harrison Ford could tell us something about carpentry. And yes, I can ensure you that we're still talking about what we are talking about. Why I'm saying that? Because this guy that you have immediately recognizes Harrison Ford. And at that time, before he was casted for some of the most famous roles he played in films, he was working as a carpenter for a living. So even now, 40 years after, he has been doing a lot of different things. I'm sure that he could still today tell us something about carpentry. So the previous slide with the title, it wasn't not much as a title as a disclaimer. Because after talking about the guy who played Han Solo, I thought that it would fit to say that a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was doing something different. So, yeah. That we all have a past, and that's part of mine. So, but that was some 10 years ago. So when Nuria asked me to say something, I said, okay, it's been more than 10 years I've been doing this. I was working more on the weather side. What can I tell you? So I hope that I would be able to, at least if you don't learn anything, at least I can entertain you for the next 7 minutes. So I will try to talk about a couple of real-life experiences in this context between science and communications, and well, I hope that would be useful for the next conversation in the activities afterwards. So, the first real-life experience is about the work with journalists. What happens when you are the nerd, the geeky guy working on a newsroom? And well, I don't remember if it was visible in the video because it wasn't working well. There's one concept that is used very often during winter time at least in Spain. I'm sure that probably in a lot of other countries. But in 8 years living in England, I have never seen that in the weather forecast. And it's that concept of, I think well, we even, I asked some native speakers and we even struggled to find a proper translation. So it's, in Spanish it's cota de nieve. I think that it should be something like rain, snow line or something like that, but it's, well, it's the height, the altitude above which, if it rains in the form of snow. So that's, well, it's not a very well-defined concept so you could think that, well, couldn't it be just simply easier to look at where the 0 degrees isotherm is? But there's people looking at very fancy empirical formula to compute that. There's even lookup tables. And there's people that work with numerical models. They produce this kind of plots where the lines is that high, that rain, snow height. So this is a product that, at least in Spain, it's popular and it's used in the forecasts. But it's a complicated one. And even so, sometimes it even makes it even makes it to the headline. So it's saying that this cota de nieve, this rain snow line, will drop to about 400 meters in the areas close to the coast. Oh my God, 5 minutes. Yeah. So what's the experience here? I was one morning in the morning shift doing the weather forecast, and after the very first piece of news, I went back to my seat in the newsroom. I was preparing the next set of maps. And then someone approached me with a serious face and said, well, the editor-in-chief wants to talk to you. Okay, good, let's go there. And then I sat there, and that person showed me the front cover of this newspaper, one of the most read newspapers in the area. Why we are not telling this? And the front cover said something similar to this, that the rain snow line will drop to 200 meters. I said, well, because I think that it's hardly relevant. It was probably not the most wise approach to tell editor-in-chief that you think that something that is in the front cover of a newspaper is not relevant, but it was, because there was a single cloud in the forecast. There was no way it will rain, so there was no way that snow could be a thing to highlight. 15 years after, I'm still not sure that that person understood the implications, but I'm a bit caricaturizing here. But what I wanted to tell is not the negative aspect, is that when we interact with journalists, we all have different interests, different approaches to what the message that we want to pass. So it's not about the negative approach that be prevented about that. It's to try to wear the other person's shoes and understand where they are coming from. And I think that's a useful learning I had at that point. Next thing, in our work as scientists working with data visualization people, we might have some fun as well. And last week, you have seen in the last couple of days a similar plot to this one, and we launched that plot last week. And well, there's one rule that people working in data visualization have. It's like a commandment for them, and it's never, ever use a bar chart that doesn't start in 0. And well, we have broken that rule with this chart. And you might think, well, but as a scientist, I look at that, I have all the information. I'm highlighting the real message behind this chart. That is how spectacularly extraordinary the summer in 2023 has been. But even so, they have the reasons. And the thing is that we had that in the past. So in the past, we have had some news outlet that has refused to use one plot similar to this one because of that reason. And you might think, but it's temperature, 0. Well, let's get to it. So if we remove everything and we get to the plot and say, okay, let's try to do what you see. So let's put this plot starting from 0, nearly a flat line. Well, these guys refusing to use the plot, they were from I will keep them in anonymity. They were from a cable news network from America. And so, well, we might say, well, maybe the problem is that you would like to have it in Fahrenheit. So we do that in Fahrenheit, and we have the same. And then as scientists, we said, well, units is a tricky business with temperature, so probably you're talking about with a proper unit. So let's go to Kelvin. And then we have 300, and then the line is completely flat. So this is a bit of a joke, but let's try to think about it. So, well, what if they have a point? Is there something that we can do better? Okay, so we have the data, And they would propose, well, why don't you put a line? Oh my God, but look at the years behind that. So they are not in order, it's a rank. So this line, it looks like a trajectory. It doesn't make any sort of sense. Okay, let's remove the line. But what a boring plot. So we said, okay, let's ask the guys, the professionals, the data visualizers, and they said, yeah, we have the solution for that. There's a revolutionary approach to this. We call it the lollipop or the stem plot. I don't know if you have heard about that, but it completely changes the view. And it's this. It's really different from a bar chart, but it doesn't have, apparently, it doesn't have the problems that a bar chart have. And they said, okay, let's do something else. You're going to love this. What if we flip the axis? And well, it kind of works. So it might be slightly awkward to look at the temperature and the x-axis, but now we have the years, they are ranked. We still have the same message, we have the differences, and it's not a bar chart starting in 0, so it's something. So we have those two approaches, but less than a minute. Okay, good. So what's the problem with this? Because we like this plot, and it might be still useful to use it. So the problem with this is that even if we have all the information there, our brain interprets the magnitude there as proportional to the area. I mean, we have bar charts, and the magnitude there is proportional to the area. That's what we are seeing. And what we are seeing there is that the warmest year on the record, it looks like it's more than 3 times warmest than the first year in the record. We know, we have the baseline here. That's not what it says, but the bars is the message that they are passing. So maybe we need to interpret this chart not as a temperature, but as a departure from the baseline. So we have chosen this 15.6 just for aesthetic purposes. But what if we can use a different baseline? So, and what's the point about this, now that I'm running out of time? The point about this is that we might break that rule, but we need to do it, if we break the rule, we need to make it for the right reasons. So it's a strict rule for data visualizer people, but we might do it. And the point was, in this interaction with other people, we might learn a lot of things of how to do better our work as scientists. And if you have to break a rule, I would break this one, because I have seen in the last couple of days a couple of slides with a blue background and red letters on it. So if I was working in data visualization, instead of the bar chart starting on 0, I would impose this rule. Please don't ever use red text over a white blue background. No, and well, and the last thing. So those two experiences, real-life experiences, because this discussion about the plot happened with Julian last Thursday, I think it was, when we started to talk about this thing of the plot. When we work as scientists, most of the time we're trying to make sense of the world, of what happens. We try to explain, we try to understand it, and that's exactly what is required from us in communications. And we enjoy doing that. So my point is that we should also be enjoying it in this interaction with communication. It's a natural part of what we do, and I found I was lucky enough to have that time working in communications and enjoy that a lot. It was one of the best times at work that I have, and I think that it's something that if we, with the right approach, we all could do. So that was my main point, and well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. Indeed, communication and science are fun when Eduardo tells us about it. Thank you. Since Jeremy is our online guest and probably he'd like to go on with his day, I suggest we have at most 2 quick questions for Jeremy and one quick answer from him. So could we have Jeremy on the screen? There he is. Who wants to ask a question to Jeremy? Okay, so there is one here. Quickly introduce yourself.
Good morning, Francesca Somma, Director General for Defense Industry and Space. My question is, how do you deal with disaster fatigue from the news? Because it's like the war in Ukraine. People at one point get used to the bad news or any bad news and it becomes white noise. How do you keep the attention high? Thank you.
Excellent question. Thank you very much. We'll take one more if there is any. in the room? All right, brilliant. Jeremy.
That's an interesting question because, of course, you all probably read the news a lot. And so you probably get your own sense of disaster fatigue. But actually, if we kind of look at our top articles ever, stories about Ukraine continue to do well. Stories about things going badly in the world, what's happening in Libya at the moment, continue to do well. It's sort of what people expect from a news channel, is to tell them about those serious things that are happening. But the flip side of that is that for our green channel, which is a kind of what we call a vertical on our page, and they have that big social media presence, their top story last year was a list of positive environmental stories for 2022. And it wasn't just a top story in January, it was still one of the top stories in May and June. It just ran and ran and ran. So people do want to have positive information about climate change. But that said, I don't think there is an awful lot of positive information, but people were looking around for something, and they found it with us, and it became a great story. How do you overcome that general sense of fatigue? I think it's probably by giving insights and comparisons. Like I was saying, comparisons are very popular. So things which can allow you to give context, because there's a lot of immediacy in news. What you want to do very quickly now is to get to the analysis of, like, why did that happen? Why was that worse than it was before? For example, with why was that storm so impactful in Libya? Why were those dams so badly looked after? What happened when those dams broke exactly? You know, those explanations of what's happening behind it are very useful. And I think also a big mention should be given to the images that we get from space, the satellite images that we get, which are awesome, but also give us context and can be very revealing. Those kind of before and after images are different ways to look at situations like wildfires, like big floods and things. And they're ways for us to kind of have smart ways around this kind of disaster fatigue. But I personally, I would say, yes, people are, I can see when I'm talking to people in my kind of friend group, in my family group, that at a certain level, they don't really like hearing me droning on about negative things related to climate change. But on another level, they are really curious to try and understand it. So it's looking for angles that are going to make them feel smarter, more informed. And then occasionally, yeah, being positive does really work. I suppose that's always going to be there. We as journalists tend to focus on negative things, but when I talk to my boss and he's talking to me about stories, he's always looking for solutions. And I think our adaptation stories, for example, the fact that our story about how Athens is adapting to heat waves is one of our top stories this year for Climate Now, shows that people are interested in kind of positive adaptation stories. But you know, news is the news, and it's our job to report it. And if there are disasters happening everywhere, that's what we should do.
Excellent. Jeremy, thanks a lot for your contributions. We'll be keeping an eye on your stories.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very much in line with work in communication and event management, there's always time pressure. So we have simulated that situation, or modeled it if you want. And in the next 15 minutes, we'll have 3 parallel workshops taking place right here. So we'll split you up in 3. The first one will be, hold on, let me get my notes. The first one will be with Raphael. Raphael, maybe you can stand up. Brilliant. There's Raphael, and the workshop will relate to press relations. So if you're interested with that, gather around Raphael at this end of the room, I suggest. More or less 20, yeah. And the second one is with Eva. Eva, if you could stand up and wave. Brilliant. And hers will be about social media. I suggest that Eva is in the back of the room, all the way in the back. And then finally, we have one on organizing events, a very important topic as well. And that one is with Francesca. Francesca, how about Middle of the room or in the corridor? What do you suggest? Middle of the room? Ah, okay. So Francesca in the middle, right? Yeah. All right, so you have 1 minute to quickly distribute. Event organization, that's the topic. Yeah.
also, yeah, the fact that they are speaking much more and taking much more the C3S content, it's also because we are helping them, providing better content and what they need, etc. But also because they are humans. Journalists are humans, most of them. And yeah, because as Jeremy said, in the past they used to talk only when they felt affected, but that's still happening. So it's how it works. And you can, unless it's a huge record, the record is like the magic word. So stand there to try to accumulate evidence in the long run, right? So you want the story for today, and for example, last week I had there was the African Summit, there was African Real Report. It lasted 1 day, and the next day they moved to something else. But I was under pressure to give interviews on 1 day. But, you know, my data for 1 year, I have to balance this. so in 2021, we had a very clear headline, which was Europe experience, that was the press release. Europe's experience its warmest summer on record, accompanied by severe floods in Western Europe and dry conditions in the Mediterranean. And there was 62% of the headlines were about the hottest summer, 22% about the year of extremes. Then last year, which was much more successful, but the headline of the press release was a bit more diffuse, so it was unprecedented extreme heat and widespread drought marked the climate. And so the proportion was 22% climate-related headlines and 14%, so the difference is very striking. But at the same time, there were many more stories through the year with many more different aspects. So that was a different approach. I guess this 2023 will be easy. But yeah, I was thinking to get, if you want to suggest which should be the title, the headline. That will be for C3S. I want to do that for yeah, one of the world is going. He can do it. Every single interview since I was asked what they share with you. Yeah, I've seen it.
Perhaps sending a positive message, kind of, we can act together to, I don't know, reverse or to stabilize the climate.
So also it says that it was their own,
I must tell you that first in media, in Czech ordinary media, that I read about Copernicus report was when Prague was compared that the climate will be like in a row. So this like a little bit make it localized. That for example in Norway, so when you put some capitals of the cities for the reports, or you divide that specifically for Scandinavians or Central Europe and so on, that you put the examples of the, for example, the cities. So then it was attractive for the journalists and for the Czech media. And then I could see for the first time Copernicus report in ordinary media.
I've been media there is a lot, but I think the 2023 state of the climate report can find it in one city.
Absolutely, of course. But when you localize it, if you use examples, so then they choose a year of more extremes. Yeah, for example, but then you select the examples.
It's been a few already.
Ever increasing.
But then we are in the record the impact
Okay, let's find some records. I'm sure we broke some records.
we probably the climate going on.
All right, everyone. The discussions are extremely relevant and interesting. Please be encouraged to continue the conversation during the coffee break and have your coffee very quickly because the next session will start super soon. It actually starts in 15 minutes. Thank you, and one more applause for the workshop leaders.
Yeah. You can turn it off.
All right, welcome back. Please take your seats. Let's wait 10 more seconds. We are now going to start. All right, brilliant. The workshops that were going on here were very interesting. I hope the other one was as interesting, and I thank you for being with us again. Before I announce the session before the last, which will be about evaluation and control, I'd like to give the floor to Radu Duschak, who is with the ECMWF procurement team. He has a very brief announcement. He was supposed to make it yesterday, but we're very grateful to Radu that he was willing to postpone it to today, given time constraints. So give him a huge round of applause, and then he has the announcement.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. As Ali mentioned, I'm part of the ECMWF procurement section and managing procurements for C3S is one of the activities under my responsibility. I would like to address specifically representatives of C3S contractors present here. So if you're present here, that means that most probably your company or organization has been selected in this capacity as a result of a procurement process conducted by ECMWF, by us. While we think that our procurement process is a fairly lean and straightforward activity, of course, guided by our procurement principles and framed within our procurement rules and regulations. Nevertheless, we strive to constantly achieve highest efficiency and effectiveness when it comes to engaging in contractual relationships with our suppliers. To test that, we would like to hear your opinion on that. And for this purpose, we've launched a short survey, and a link to this survey can be found on a flyer which you might have seen at the registration desk and on the tables in the coffee break area. The survey, just to make a point here, the survey is focused mainly on the tendering process. So that is the initial stage of a procurement process. It should take not more than 5 minutes to complete this survey. And your inputs will help us better understand how well we perform, how happy you are with our tendering process, and whether we do our best in communicating with potential suppliers before and during the tendering process. And the final point, I acknowledge the fact that many people present here may not be directly involved in preparing their tender responses, the tender responses for their companies or organizations. Therefore, I kindly ask you to either just take a flyer with you or simply forward the link to this survey to the relevant people within your organizations who are more hands-on in this tender preparation process. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Radu. We now kick off the session on evaluation and quality control. Andre Obergen of ECMWF will talk about an enhanced EQC function for C3S. Here he is.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to have 3 talks in this session. I will start with a more conceptual overview of the EQC. We will then have Chinchwe trying to bring things a bit to life. And in the end, we have Paula talking about the user-driven evolution of the EQC. Next slide, please. So it's time to talk about quality, since we are in the quality hotel. And the first thing I wanted to mention or to emphasize is that EQC is adding value to C3S data. EQC is contributing to making C3S a trusted source of climate information. It adds relevant information for users about the quality of the data, the metadata, the documentation, and the underlying science. And we also try to advise on best practices in the use of data. There are a couple of challenges for EQC, that it must be accurate, it must be complete, and it must be always up to date, which is a constraint, which we realize in the first phase of EQC is an important one, because we have to make EQC sustainable and maintainable. And the complexity of the EQC in the first phase was kind of hampering this. So we are thinking of a redesign of the EQC to make it simpler, to actually make sure we can maintain the information. And the other aspect is that EQC needs to be accessible and appealing to all users, including non-scientists. So this is another constraint and another driver for the evolution of the EQC, to make things a bit more appealing for different types of users. In the end, we would like to enable a user to answer the ultimate question, which is how, and how well, in particular, can I use these data for my purposes? So an EQC presentation needs a reference to the CDS, which is the core of everything we do, and we like to say that we have a quality-assured climate data store. So everything which goes in and out of the climate data store is actually following quality control and quality assurance procedures. Things are getting standardized. Data is traceable for users, it's transparent, etc. So this is largely thanks to the EQC function and all the activities behind. A few years ago, there was a big milestone in the program when we became operational with the EQC function. Since then, we have in the climate data store many data sets associated with quality information. We have an EQC tab there that many of you may know. I'm going to show it to you here. So there's a huge wealth of information there about the quality of the data, about what to do with the data, what not to do with the data, etc. Users can learn about certain requirements being met. Is there a validation report? Is there a user guide? These kind of things. There are independent assessments, a wealth of information about the scientific quality of the data, expert evaluation, maturity of the data, etc. And there are key messages like strengths and weaknesses. The problem with this is that things were quite mixed. So we mixed different aspects of EQC information, and also the access to this was not easy because many important information was quite hidden. So there were different layers, and it was not easy for users to navigate through this table. So in this new phase, we are actually redesigning the whole concept of EQC. Not necessarily the content that much, but the way users can access it. So we had a larger or a longer consultation phase with different stakeholders, an expert panel, internal staff, data providers, users in particular, and also an external consultant with Dick D, who helped us shape the new function. Thanks to Dick. And one of the key messages was that, well, much of the current EQC is actually very useful, but there's too much of it, and the presentation to users is not very effective. So we wanted to do a couple of things. First of all, to better distinguish between the various aspects of EQC. I get to this in a minute. We would like to reduce the granularity of the EQC by providing info at the catalog entry level, because at the moment a user has to make a selection about which variable they are interested, etc. So there are some steps a user needs to take before actually getting to the information. So this is something we would like to improve. Overall, the navigation, as I mentioned, should be improved, so the overall user experience. An important point, and this is also a big driver for this new EQC, is that we would like to be closer connected to user requirements. So everything we do in EQC should actually be guided by questions users have regarding quality. So needs they have regarding certain standards, but also concrete questions they have about how well the data is for my purpose. So I'm going to introduce some of the changes we are making at the moment, or we have made, starting with the EQC infrastructure. So in the past phase, the infrastructure, so all the development was done within the EQC contract. Now we have moved all of the architecture aspects into the C3S contract. So Predictia is leading on this as part of the Be Open C3S contract. And we have now what we call a content integration manager. So this is the tool, the system that hosts all the EQC content, that operates all the workflows around this, is now an integral part of the C3S infrastructure. It's not visible to users, but what the user will see in the end is the C3S portal, which is now very much connected to the infrastructure, and we will have a much better look and feel, etc. Because at the moment, this EQC table is sort of a plug-in from the external component. So now we will have an integrated component. Talking about the content, I mentioned already these 3 different aspects we are looking at, that we are trying to detangle. So the first one is quality assurance. This is basically the classical ticking the box exercise, where we look at concrete requirements and check whether these are fulfilled. The other aspect are the quality assessments. We have been doing these in the past as well, so scientific evaluation of the quality. But these will now be guided or driven by concrete user questions. So not just diagnostics for the sake of producing diagnostics, but very concrete questions to be addressed. And at the end of the day, the most ambitious part will be fitness for purpose, so really helping users to understand how well they can use the data for their purpose. A few words about these different categories. So quality assurance, as I mentioned, is about checking the data, metadata, documentation for completeness and correctness, using well-defined requirements. The message to the user is here that we have checked everything for you, and you can get details if you need to. Some users will just be happy to know we have checked everything is quality assured. Other users would like to delve into the details of that, and we provide this. So there is, at the highest level, a simple checklist, but you can actually dive into that and learn about what were the checks, what we have checked, what is the result of the check, etc. We have come up with 12 generic requirements on the C3S. These were driven mainly by our internal requirements, so what we have in the ITTs, what we ask our data providers, but they were also following kind of the community standards from WMO, GCOS, etc., and also in line with the FAIR principles. So these are requirements regarding different categories. So general means the data set as a whole in the catalog, data record, the numerical data, metadata, and documentation. So you see here the list of generic requirements. I'm not going through these, but I give you an example because they mean actually different things for different data sets. So this is important to distinguish. We have a common umbrella, but we do distinguish on the data set level. For example, uncertainty. There's this requirement that data must include information about uncertainties. But for satellite observations, it means different things than for climate projections. For satellite, it means that, or we request from our providers, that uncertainties are provided within the data set in terms of accuracy and precision, and our ECV providers, for example, do that already. Climate projections is a very different animal, and there we request that uncertainties can be estimated by combining multiple simulations generated by different models or ensembles. Then we come to the quality assessment. As I said, we did this in the past already, and it has received quite positive feedback. But we want to move away from providing general or generic diagnostics. We would like to put it in the context of actual use cases. And the message to users there will be that we provide scientific or extensive scientific expertise along with the data. And the way we're going to present this is via Jupyter Notebooks. So this is something we are doing already for the training and for other activities. So this is a new de facto kind of output. And those Jupyter Notebooks will tell stories basically to the users about a quality-related question. Can be about, is the data set suitable to study trends in region XYZ? Can relate to accuracy, precision, stability, whatever. And the advantage of these Jupyter Notebooks is that we can also provide the code alongside these diagnostics. So users who are interested in that can actually use the code, can customize even the diagnostics, use it for their specific region according to their interests, etc. And other users who are just interested in the story, in the key messages, can just stick to the text and the figures, etc. So there are different ways for users to interact with these Jupyter Notebooks. At the end of the day, we cannot cater for every single or possible purpose application that users have, but we can help them to kind of make these assessments or these decisions themselves by offering them tools, etc. My second to last slide is on the fitness for purpose aspect, arguably the most ambitious part and the most difficult part. Again, as I said, we would like to help users understand how well they can use the data. Message to users, we can help you use these data correctly for your purpose. So what we do, the minimum we can do there is kind of providing an executive summary of the EQC, of the assessments, of the quality assurance, etc., a summary of the literature, strengths and weaknesses, do's and don'ts, etc., and recommendations for best practice. So this is kind of a little bit the new kid on the block. We will have to see how this evolves. We will also have to work closely with users. This is something that Paula will talk about in a minute. My last slide. Some conclusions. So the EQC approach has been redesigned. We would like to be much more closer tied to actual user requirements in terms of the quality assurance. So those requirements I've shown you are technical requirements, but nevertheless they are also based on user requirements. And for the assessment, we would like to really be close to real questions that users ask regarding quality. So the immediate goal of this exercise is to help users assess fitness for purpose for any given data set themselves, based on the requirements they have and the available information. And sort of a longer-term vision, which is not being implemented at the moment, but we believe is something really to look at. If we get this EQC right, if we manage to have all the information about fitness for purpose, etc., we may be able actually to change the way users search for data. They may type in their requirement, their application area, their needs, and then the machine may just propose a list of data sets that may be useful for this particular purpose. So this is a bit a longer-term outlook. And I stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, André. Before I announce the next speaker, I've been asked to announce that, and we're happy with that we have a tour of the Mendel Monastery, which will start at 12:45. The pickup location is the entrance of our hotel, the Quality Hotel, and your guide will be Easy. Where is Easy? There he is, he's in the back. So 12:40. And we'd like to ask, well, maybe you need to think about it. At the end of the session, I'll ask who wants to go, and then you raise your hands, and then we have an estimate of the number of people. Now, without further ado, let's move on to Xunshe Yang of CNR, and the title of her presentation is Showcasing EQC in Climate Datasets. There she is. Give her an applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Andrew has presented the concept of the evaluation and quality control. Now I'm going to show you how we have implemented the concept and the examples we have. First, I would like to remind us the objective of our evaluation and quality control activities. We would like to continue the EQC activities based on the previous contract and to involve the EQC concept and the infrastructure, which was presented by Andrew, and also to consolidate and harmonize, streamline the entire framework, including the methodologies, procedures, and output. Our performance of the evaluation and quality control, we include the data, include in-situ data, satellite, ECVs, climate projections, seasonal forecast, and reanalysis. It's really a diverse climate data set. In order to provide expert evaluation, we have a very big team who have expertise on different data sets. We have 11 partners, around 60 people actively working on these activities. For example, we do, as CNR, we have expertise on the ocean. That's why we evaluate ocean ECVs, satellite ECVs. CMCC and NERSC, they have expertise on the climate projections, so they evaluate CMIP6 and CODEX. Instead, Met Norway and ENEA, they have strong expertise on the seasonal forecast. That's why they evaluate seasonal forecast and a seasonal forecast. And the other partners, they have strong expertise on land, ocean, or atmosphere. For the satellite, they would do the evaluation. Not only the scientific expertise, we also have technical experts from BOpen who supports us to implement the EQC function. Additionally, we also have the Climate Data Factory and Plus Atlantic who interact with the downstream users. They will help us to talk to the real users to get the feedback on the EQC content. Okay, we already see Andrew already mentioned we have 3 components in the evaluation and quality control. The quality assurance already mentioned by Andrew, so we will show we will check each requirement defined already, and when we have the requirements already fully met, and we will give you a tick, so the users, they don't have to worry that, for example, the documentation is not well written. If the information is not, for example, if the information is not consistent with the data itself, we will give you a warning sign and we'll explain to you why the information is not consistent. We'll check thoroughly the climate data store information, including the documentation, the overview page, to see the information provided in this documentation is consistent with the data set that you are downloading. Then we go to the, it's not working. It's too much. Thank you. The second component is quality assessment. Quality assessment, as what Andrew mentioned, we would like to know what kind of quality the users concern. Currently, we just started internally. As a scientific experts, we believe these kind of questions are important to the users. For example, for the Area 5 reanalysis, we have thought maybe people, the users would like to see if the reanalysis, Area 5 reanalysis can represent the climatology well or not. That's the first user questions we have proposed. The second one, we all know that the global warming signal is very strong now. We would like to see how well does the Area 5 reanalysis represent the global warming. In order to answer these quality questions, we have performed scientific diagnostics within the Jupyter Notebook Andrew just mentioned. Definitely we will provide the methodologies we have applied and provide the main outcome in terms of the quality assessment to be transparent of the quality assessment we have performed. They can also, we will provide the Jupyter Notebook as what Andrew just mentioned. If you click the link of the Jupyter Notebook, they will see all the how to say that. Oh, sorry. the code is just a snapshot of the Jupyter Notebook we have produced. You can see that since the Jupyter Notebook has a really strong advantage compared to only the code, we can have the user the quality questions here and the procedures we have performed in terms of the analysis, and you see the code, and you have all the figures around, and also the main outcome of our assessment. Definitely, we also give you the references we have used to provide this assessment, not only our own assessment, but also the assessment provided by the literature. For example, I don't have here, I have the Hans paper on the ERA 5. So the users can use this Jupyter Notebook. They can modify. For example, here we have the 2-meter air temperature. They can also do their own diagnostics. Definitely, in that case, they will do their own self-assessment instead of we provide the text here. Like what Andrew mentioned, we have the last component because we check the technical quality of the dataset, scientific quality of the dataset. Definitely, we would like to summarize, give the users the high-level quality information. We will summarize the assessment we have performed, but not only this one, we also give the key strength and key weaknesses of the dataset. For example, ERA 5 compared to other dataset is really long-term, really 80 years, and also assimilate large set of instrument dataset. Also, the uncertain information is provided based on the 10 ensemble members, even though with coarse resolution. Definitely, we will give users the weakness because they may want to know the linear trend of air temperature at some, but we know that we will tell users, give them information that non-physical trends may be presented in some regions. So they have to, when they interpret the data, they have to be careful of this, or they have to know this issue because of the assimilation of different observing system. Okay, we also provide users, this data set has been used for different climate projections, climate applications, which are already implemented in the climate service. Because in this case, for example, we will give them the links. If you click here, actually, this is the climate applications already implemented in the climate data store. And also, we all know that ERA 5 also covers the land domain. Some users, they are confused. So which did I actually use for my applications? If they want to do the land applications, we'll recommend the users to check with ERA 5 land dataset instead of only check the ERA 5. So this is the high level information we will provide. And how it will look like in the new climate data store. I don't have a demo here. Before that one, all the activities, assessment activities, we have in order to control our quality of, the quality of our work, we have very thorough, consolidated workflow. So we would do our evaluation, and we would do our internal reviews, because some evaluators, we cross-use the data set. So it's really convenient for us inside of the EQC team to do the internal reviews. But also, we would talk to the data providers who know the data more than us. Once all the reviews process are done, we will submit it to C3S to have the final publication of our work. You see here in the system, in the content integration management system, we will see all the history. We will check every process already passed, before we go. How would it look like in the future, the EQC? As Andrea already mentioned, the EQC component will be fully integrated in the climate data store. So this is the the snapshot of the demo of the climate data store in the future. You will find actually the tab it's called EQC assessment. We may have a new name in the future, but tell you that you can find all the information, quality information we have provided in the website, and you see all the components here. I don't show all the information, but the content I just showed you, you will find everything here. Yeah, that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Chen, thank you very much. an iPhone in a yellow case, I should say, has been mislocated. If you find it, please bring it to the registration office.
Sorry, if you found, thank you in the meantime.
We planned this. Let me encourage our audience online to contribute their questions over Slido. Can we have the Slido QR code? I hope it'll appear shortly, and we'll address as many of your questions as possible. Meanwhile, have you made up your mind as to whether or not you are going to join the visit to the Mendel building? If so, raise your hand if you have decided to join. The Mendel Monastery. Easy. How long is the tour? 30 minutes. I suggest the question on storing luggage, you figure that out. For now, we just wanted to have an indication for Easy to know what to expect. So yeah, check with registration, please. Thanks a lot, and Easy, thanks in advance for taking us there. So, without further ado, our next speaker is with Plus Atlantic, and we'll talk about user-driven evolution of the EQC, Paula Sauji. Please give her an applause.
So hello, good morning. So I'm Paula from Plus Atlantic. First, I would like to say thank you to Andrea for inviting the user engagement work package to present the work we are developing under the 520 contract, the EQC contract. So I will talk about the user-driven evolution of the EQC. So then I brought the user. So you can call her Anne. Anna is a new user. She's just probably one of the 274,000 something user. She's happy. She just got inside the store, saw the diversity of data sets we have there. But she looks a little bit confused, or she's just thinking, and then you have heard this phrase before. So she's thinking, she has an application, probably she's a scientist, as we learned before in the other days. She's probably a scientist looking for error 5. And then she's thinking how, she has an application, and she's thinking how and how well she can use the data that she selected, or the other data for her application or for her study. And then the function of the EQC is to pass 3 key messages to Anne in a very easy way, in a very user-friendly way. You have seen these messages also. So the first one, that's yes, we can help you choose these data. Don't worry, we have checked all the technical stuff for you. If you want more information, we can provide to you. And anticipating some questions you may have, looking into these data, we have also some scientific expertise to provide you with this data. So this is the function of the QC. This is the 3 messages, the key 3 messages you want to pass for the user. And we think that we're not passing in a very attractive way. So the function or the job of the user engagement work pack was to ensure that. So we have developed a user consultation strategy. So the goal of this the consultation is to collect stakeholders' requirements, feedback, to improve our own work, internal work of the EQC team, but also to ensure that the current or the new EQC information could be displayed in a more efficient and a more user-friendly way. We have selected 2 types of stakeholders, the general users from C3S, but also some selected experts and a small group to consult. So how you are going to achieve that? We plan 5 consultation activities. I'm not going to talk about all. I'm only going to talk about the ones that we have already started and collected some results. So the first one here is the user requirements database, the URDB analysis. You also learned yesterday that URDB has nowadays more than 4,700 requirements ingested. Here we need to make a point that those requirements were collected by previous contracts. but was not collected to respond on a specific issue regarding the EQC or EQC functionality. But the way that the RDB has been structured and designed, the fields had allowed us to develop a methodology to extract and to identify EQC or maybe EQC-related requirements. So this is the methodology. So very quickly, very briefly here is 4,700 requirements. It will be impossible to read one by one, so we need to decrease this number, maximize our work. So we did some filters, so we took out subjects and topics that were not related, that we thought that's not related with EQC. So we decreased the number of requirements. We perform a keyword search function in the Excel, in the summary of those requirements. We selected like almost 30 keywords, EQC issues. And then after that, we analyze the requirements one by one, at least like all the requirements that receive or contain at least one EQC word or EQC keyword. I think we analyzed almost 1,000 requirements, and then we ended up with 243 EQC-related requirements. The analysis of those requirements is in the URAD. The URAD is the user's requirements analysis documents, and those analyses are helping the EQC team, our contract, to evolve, to tailor our work. And these are the type of analysis you have, like the main popular EQC issues or EQC or quality requirements. As you can see, uncertainty is one of the most popular one, but you also got these tables. You provide them with tables with each one of the EQC issues. For instance, like uncertainty should be represented through different ways, like variance, standard deviation, and quantity in quantiles, should be provided by pixel single measurements. The model, people ask, like, for instance, information about how climate models outputs compare to other climate models. Again, the possibility to compare different models. This is the type of information you get. The main results here is that we didn't discover a new demand for quality assurance information. However, the information we are having here are helping the evaluators, the EQC team, in the quality assessment component with the elaboration, for instance, of the using questions that we are going to have in this component. So the second consultation activity we had planned in our strategy is the expert panel consultation. We are planning to have one per year. We had the first one was held online in mid-March this year. Some of you probably here were invited, and then you got like 21 participants that interacted and discussed during 3 hours the two components of the QC, the quality assessment and the quality assurance. The idea was to collect feedback, to collect some inputs, but open the discussion to show the work we have done so far, the content you have, how you could evolve with this, and also could show some examples, some ideas of how this information could be provided and displayed in the new CDS for the users, and then collect some feedback about these possible options. So some results you have for the quality, for instance, for the quality assurance outcomes. So there is a need for better clarify the meaning of the requirements. The evaluators also ask for to define a method of verifications of each requirements. Something very technical, so if the requirement needs to be reviewed or verified by a user external platform, maybe should avoid. And regarding like the way we present the design of this information on the new CDS, we didn't have an answer so far, but you know that we need to define a clear way to demonstrate it to the user. Regarding the quality assessments outcomes, so the evaluators, the EQC team are elaborating the user questions. Of course, most of the questions are for scientists, so we need maybe thinking outside of the box. So who will be the profiles you want to target, the majority, the minority, do the balance between those type of questions. The questions need to be simple, how these questions relate to sectoral applications. We need to validate these questions with the user. This is the next thing that we are going to do. and the feasibility to target non-academic users with some data sets we have in our catalog. So our next user consultation activity we're going to have now is the user surveys. So we are pretending to run the survey next month. We are going to start with reanalysis users because as we have learned also before, is our biggest pool of users here in C3S. We are going to use the EAU survey platform. And then we want to collect feedback from the users regarding now at least to know how the consultation, the appreciation of the EQC you have now, but also show our work, show the questions you have there, the user questions you have, and ask them, for instance, for new quality requirements or new questions if they want to see new ECVs to be assessed. And if you have the opportunity, we are going to also have some user experience questions that you allow us to know if the user is satisfied or not with the displayed information. It's hard to secure the right response, but we intend, we had some approach for that. Who works with user consultation know how it's hard to do that. But we are intending like personal invitations letters, survey guides, and make a video. We have thousands of surveys running nowadays for many institutions, so it's hard to convince them to respond, but we had some approach for that. So, and then I have some more minutes, but yeah, my last slide, you come back with the Anna. Now you can see Anna is quite happy. By the way, she was happy before, but now she's even happy, and she is quite confident that the way, like everything that she could find there, she could solve her problems. We passed the message. We helped her to select the most appropriate data for her purpose. We have assured her that the application is based in our well-documented information. And even more, we have provided her with practical examples and guidelines to accelerate her data uptake process that we know that sometimes takes a long time. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Paula, please join us on stage. Same goes for the other speakers. And I encourage online participants to keep contributing their questions. And Andre, as you can see, holds an iPad. He'll keep an eye on questions that come in. Can we have a microphone for the room, please? And please raise your hand if you have a comment or question. Brilliant. In this case, because that's closer to the AV team, we'll start from the back and then move forward. I believe I saw Chiara's hand go up. Could we have a microphone reach Chiara, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentations. So first, I'm happy to hear that there is a mechanism for this user consultation, because it is clear that the requirements from the users and the users' questions are two different things. So the question I have refers to the example that was shown by Chunshui. And so in this case, you have picked up one question as an example that came from some, let's say, expert user list of questions, initial questions. And now is my question on this is, for example, you ask how ERA 5 is good in representing the global warming. But I think we have heard that there is like 10,000 papers behind ERA 5. So my question is, why would it be better to go analyze the scientific papers and give us an answer? I mean, probably the answer to the question is already in this literature. And why should a tool that recompute the trends and make the calculation be used? Which is the added values in this specific case of a tool versus an analysis of the huge literature behind?
It's a good question. Actually, we started with these questions from ourselves, and but like Paula mentioned, this is our starting point, and then we want to we want to use this quality assessment as a starting point to talk with the users. Basically, the question we will ask them, what do you want actually from us? Because if we don't give them anything, just go there to talk, it's impossible. This one answer. The other one, in terms of the literature, it is true. We will check the literature, definitely. But yeah, as you mentioned, there are so many literatures already outside. So we will, we will do our best to check the literature. But the code, the Jupyter Notebook code, is also useful because it's, they can, if the users they don't know the data, this the really have never used the data set, they can see what we have done. Also for the transparency we have provided. It's the combination. Not only the literature, not only our, our own assessment, it's the combination of two aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. If I may add, I mean, the whole point of this exercise is actually that we try to, prevent users from reading all this literature which is available, and to help them actually to look at, at the relevant material that we can provide to them. So that it's an added value that we want to provide.
It goes up. Yes.
If I just may add, the problem is that users span a very broad variety. What I think could be very useful would be a synthetic sentence, couple of sentences, maybe a page or something, which tries to summarize the consensus results derived from the literature from those non-expert users. I mean, expert users probably have read the literature and they don't care about other people's opinions. They have their own opinion. The idea, well, essentially it's true. I mean, an expert user has already made up his own opinion. Non-expert users probably would be very useful to have synthetic text which summarizes the leading opinion in the literature. But then really it is a matter of having both. I think that the system should have, as Chun-Shue was pointing out, should have both solutions. Because the very non-expert user might like to see, if you want, the process of evaluations starting at least in the very early stages, and see how some sort of simple evaluations are produced and what results they produce. I think it's a matter of having multiple approaches to this.
Excellent. Sam, is coincidentally your point related to this one? Okay, so let's take Sam first, perhaps, before we return to the audience, to the panel. I think it's on already, yeah.
I'll try now. Yeah, great. So thank you. And I think it is really important to ground the EQC process in the peer review process as well. And perhaps ChatGPT can do a summary of the ERA 5 papers, for example. Let's use the tools available. My question, though, is language. Language is critical and it's polarizing. So Chun-Shue, in the example you provided, you said that ERA 5 reasonably represents temperature. If I was a policymaker, I would run a mile from that data set, and I don't think it's accurate. It depends on the scale, obviously. But I think we, again, need to align to literature and perhaps the IPCC and how they're describing things, and make sure we're using common language to improve understanding rather than polarize the community for the other person's point on users are very broad, and we want to ensure all users can access the information they need.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We have, in the last phase, we do have already received this feedback in terms of the language we provide, because from the scientific community, we have our own way of writing it. It is correct. We need to not only to see what the result, the assessment result coming out, but also the language. We should be careful when we give some quality information. I agree. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have anything from the online audience?
Yeah. We have one question. We can take it now.
Let's take one.
Yeah, there's one question from Freya Wamborg. Some of you may know. Actually, two questions. How and for whom will the EQC team pick the use cases for the Jupyter Notebooks? And for the Jupyter Notebooks, and will they include examples of non-fitness for purpose?
Yeah.
So I can take this question. I think the answer to the first one has been outlined by Paula, more or less, that we are trying to engage with users, trying to understand what their particular user questions are. And once we have selected them, we will have kind of a further engagement process with the data providers, with the technical leads in our team, etc., to validate whether this is a question we can actually make an assessment for. The other question, I find it quite interesting, if we also want to address non-fitness for purpose, I think the answer is yes. I think we would like to also show some examples of bad use, or maybe to advise on things which users maybe should not do with the data. We may also look at intercomparisons, so not everything will be based on one data set, but maybe on different data sets, and then we can advise for this particular purpose. You may choose this data set over this one for particular reasons. So this is in the plan as well here.
Thank you very much, Andre. Anka, and then followed by the gentleman.
So I was going to move away from this topic to a different one. I don't know if I'm going to break the story. Quality assurance. So you had a really nice example, and it's relatively straightforward to grasp. There's going to be a test of compliance with certain expectations, and if compliance is not met, then you raise a flag. But in some cases, non-compliance is for some easily fixable flaw. I'm thinking, for example, documentation doesn't consistently describe one thing consistent with the other bits of the CDS. Wouldn't it be more useful to just try to fix that rather than just say it doesn't fully meet expectations and leave it for users who are not going to bother to go to the EQC tab to find this out and not know where they stand?
That's exactly what we would like to do. It's not we for sake of putting a warning sign over there. That's why we have the interaction with the data providers. As long as we find a problem, we talk with them, and if they can simply how to easily fix, they will fix it. And that's what I mentioned. The quality assurance not only for the users, but also for the data providers to improve the documentation, metadata, user guidance. Yeah. I missed that. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Maybe just to add, I mean, this is also a vehicle kind of to provide an incentive for the data providers to comply with all the requirements. So it's sort of this mechanism. And I fully agree with you, Anka.
Okay, so we'll take a question from the back first and then move to the front to the, if you could put your hands up. The gentleman over here is next.
So I'd like to follow up to Anka's point, because I was thinking about making an interjection. There's also cases where there's no expectation that it's met. So, for example, my lot is concerned with providing fundamental climate data record. We absolutely should not, cannot provide uncertainty information. It would be unfair on our contract and unfair on a user to say we could put a big red cross against it. Surely we would need to put a not applicable against it. So there is a need to understand that in some cases, what you consider essential may actually be completely out of scope. And it's not clear to me that you have a workaround yet for that. The obvious one would be not applicable. But you need to users need to understand that certain holdings that are being served via the CDS may not meet the requirements for very good reason, and then it may not be a reasonable expectation that they ever would.
It's a good question. It's a good comment. What do we exactly uncertainty? Because it's a very long discussion also among us, the team, and also data providers. What we have, we use the word uncertainty for all the data sets. But when we provide information, we will tell user what does mean the uncertainty in terms of this data set. But you just mentioned for the in situ data set. In situ data set, I didn't take this consideration of your comment. I think it's a very good one, even though, because currently it's like this. If it's not applicable, we just simply put not applicable. But I agree with you, we should put why it's not applicable. I agree with you on the in situ data. Yeah, it's a good comment. Thank you.
Briefly, Andre?
Because it's a very important point, and none of us made actually in the presentation the point that this is all kind of evolution. It's not written in stone. And I think we have these variants for these generic requirements, and we can still kind of modify them. And we need to learn from these particular cases that Peter was mentioning. So that's very good.
Thank you for that addition. Yes, sir.
Hello. Thank you for the requirements analysis. I found that absolutely brilliant. It's a really nice kind of way of looking at it. And also the checklist will really help users. My question is, following on from the requirements analysis, is there any idea of the standards that you can now set with regards to documentation arising from the requirements? Because the documentation would need to align with a certain standard to get the tick mark. And this is more for the data providers, but also the external reviewers who are currently reviewing the data. Is there something that we can now use, or at least for the contractors to be aware of as they move into their next round of contracts and can start thinking about the time that it's going to take to upgrade their documentation? And the second question is, are EQC currently using the reviews that are being done? Or is there something that the reviewers can do to tweak our reviews to make them of more use to you?
I go. Yeah, I noted yesterday you're from the satellite ECV review team. We already agreed with Hawking that we will take advantage of what you going to go through the documentation instead of doing twice the documentation review process. But it's a good point. We don't have the standard you just mentioning. I think we need to think about, because their documentation for different data sets is different currently on the climate data store. So yeah, we need to coordinate for different data sets how we can align together. Yes, a good point. Thank you.
My point is actually to the same point. Okay. Because the data sets provided and are then available are in part very different. So I think this is already implemented, but please be sure that those who look at the data sets and do the evaluation get in touch before with the data providers. So you can make very, very many mistakes because you just don't know what the specifics are. And we have learned that it is really good to have a chat and to provide the base why things are as they are, to understand also the specifics of the data sets, so that you can really focus on the critical tasks and not lost in things that are absolutely of no concern. So this would be just a comment that this is really important and helpful for the entire process.
Yeah, quick comment to this is a very important point. In our first phase of EQC, we already had this good practice of verifying with the data providers the content that EQC is producing. So before we're going to publish something, we always consult with the producer of the data to see whether everything is in line, etc. So it's an important point and it's considered.
I just want to remind, because currently, yeah, you work on the glacier ECVs. In our system now will be running very soon now. You will receive automatically the task to check what we have state in the quality assurance or quality assessment. So we will consult you for particularly each ECVs. We will talk with you before we do any publication on the web page.
We have space for, I think, one more comment or question. Let's see if there's one. There's one here in the front.
Thank you very much. So I was very surprised about the difference in complexity of dealing with a Jupyter notebook and asking this very easy, answering these very easy questions. So could you say something about that?
Is the question clear?
You mean just want to understand your question. You mean how can we use the Jupyter notebook to answer simple questions?
Yeah. So you have
the microphone, please.
You want the users to deal with Jupyter notebooks, which might not be that easy task, or also maybe people are hesitant using it. On the other hand, you have very simple questions answered. So it's just I'm curious about this uneven complexity and how you deal with that and where it comes from, perhaps.
You raised the concern. It's also our concern as well, because Jupyter notebooks we can do simple task. Not even that simple if the data set is huge. What we have, we still haven't discussed amount, how there's a big discussion on top of this one. We have been, personally, I have been thinking, we can use the Jupyter notebooks to answer simple quality questions. But for complicated ones, we would do our own assessment offline, but put the quality assessment together in a summary area. The reason why we want to use the Jupyter Notebook is several reasons, because we can help users to understand, we have to be transparent. They also to learn how to use the Python code. They can download offline. It's basically presented by James, I think, on first day on the EarthKit, this kind of open source code. So they can simply use them if they are not familiar with the data or with the code. Yeah, with two, yes, it's a big concern. It depends how we are going to handle in a next future. Also, what the real users will ask in terms of the quality. If we are able to handle, yes. But if not, we will find the offline solutions. Yeah.
Seems like this topic will continue to be very relevant to all of you. Let's please thank Andre, Paula, and Schönschel.
Thank you.
Before we start our last session, and we don't have a break, so I'll give you a mini break of my own, please join me standing if you want for a quick energizer before we continue the General Assembly of C3S. Excellent. I see some of you already stretching their muscles. That's brilliant. Now let's start by breathing in as deeply as you can and breathing out at your own pace. Do it 3 times, as long as it's deep. Try to fill the entire area of your lungs. One final time. Now, as you breathe in, you put your shoulders up as tightly as you can. Breathe out, putting them down. One more time. Now we breathe in, making this movement. And you breathe out. Now you do it again, but you stand on your toes. Brilliant. Now make whatever movement you need in order to feel more relaxed. Turn, move your neck, scratch something on the back, on the front. Brilliant. Now do as I do. All right, we'll do this again. Okay? All right, now you do it in a sort of rhythmic pace. Okay? We do, instead of twice, let's do once on the shoulders. That seems easier. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, the first is hard. Pa, pa, pa. Say it with me. Pa, pa, pa. Pa, pa, pa. Climate data. Climate data. I'm not hearing you. Climate data. Climate data. Copernicus. Copernicus. Long live the king. Thank you very much. Take a seat. All right. Hope you're energized somewhat. That took us a minute and a half. Quite efficient. Let's now quickly move to the final session of our GA, which is titled New C3S Activities and Closing. And to start, I'd like to give the floor to Suzanne Mecklenburg of ESA, and she will talk about ESA's new climate change initiative, Climate Space. Please give her an applause. You have a clock on your return screen.
Okay. Well, thank you. Can you hear me? It's on, yeah? Sorry, I can't hear it. So thank you for having me here. I think last year I came and sort of talked about our plans for the new tranche of the Climate Change Initiative. Meanwhile, we have been to our member states to ask for a continued funding and a couple of new ideas to be included in the Climate Change Initiative. And really today I want to brief you on what that actually boils down to in terms of procurements and new projects that we are planning. 2023 is quite an important year in terms of climate. It's the first global stocktake that we are currently conducting. We just had the release of the technical document from the UNFCCC last week to sort of summarize where we stand with this one. I think it didn't necessarily contain many new messages. I think it was just a good summary of what we know, probably also from the last IPCC assessment report number 6, and we are well into the planning now for assessment report number 7. So that's one of our motivators, and the other big motivator is, of course, addressing the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. So in a nutshell, to recap of what I said last year, there's sort of 4 big blocks, I would say, from what we would like to do. On the far left, you see what we call the excellence space. So this is this portfolio of essential climate variables that we are running, and I come to that in a little bit more detail there. And also under this heading, we are providing the R&D and pre-operational development that we provide essentially in support of what you are doing here in the operational context. And then the big new topics that we want to put some more emphasis on is on addressing the UNFCCC Paris Agreement that you see here. We have actually quite upped our game in terms of linking observations and modeling, also now hosting the CMIP project office at ESA. And last but not least, we will put some more emphasis on actually using the existing climate data records in combining them in cross-ECV activities and tipping points. Now, in a little bit more detail. This is probably a chart that you've seen many times before. The reason that I wanted to show that is that from last year on, we have actually added quite a few essential climate variables to our portfolio. We're now covering 27 of them. The new ones are vegetation, river discharge, which very much came out of consultation with you here, with C3S. We have also added precursors for ozone and aerosol and long-lived greenhouse gases, which is about to be started in about a month, and we are discussing at the moment also to add anthropogenic water use, and we've got a proposal in that we are assessing, so we hope to start fairly soon. In addition to this one, I would like to say that next year we will have a call for new ECVs, so basically ECVs that go beyond our current portfolio. Obviously we would like to consult with you what your R&D needs are, and would like to align this call to yourselves, but also other Copernicus services that we're talking to, in particular marine and land. I don't know whether that starts automatically. The point that I wanted to, I don't know whether you can start that from the back maybe. Yes, thank you. So this is the big block on the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. We are planning 3 activities here. The first one is to actually extend what you see on the left-hand side. We have a project called RECAP. It very much looks at comparing the bottom-up approach of emission quantification to the top-down approach that we are favoring from the Space Agency using space data and inverse modeling. We're working a lot with national entities who are responsible for the emission quantification in the respective countries. And we would like to take that a step further, and we'll release an invitation, ITT is ESA speak for invitation to tender, sorry, I should say that, on global land carbon budget and also on putting attribution to regional drivers. This should come out later this year. It's fairly high finances, I would say, 2 to 3 million, at least for our program, and about 3 years there. Secondly, we're also discussing at the moment, or have discussed actually with CAMS in particular, an ITT on greenhouse gas emissions that looks mainly on hotspot monitoring for methane and comparing the different data sets that we have available for this one. This is coming out as we speak, should be sort of published in about a week or 2. Again, same finance envelope and also time-wise the same type of envelope. The third activities, and that's probably really interesting for you as well, it's a Amazon field campaign that comes out of a recommendation that comes from CIOS, the Strategic Implementation Plan, who recommended to look at areas where we have greater modeling uncertainty. Two suggestions were made. One was the Amazon basin and the other one was Saharan tundra. We're already doing quite a lot of work sort of in AMPAC, in our AMPAC project in the tundra region. So we decided to go for the Amazon basin here. We're talking at the moment with our Brazilian counterparts, but also internationally with NASA, for example, of how we can combine our activities and our resources, because it's quite a resource-intense thing to do. The idea is to do that next year in the area, in the Tabajos area, and we will have next week or the week after, actually, a colleague of mine going out to sort of investigate on ground what we can do there and discuss with our Brazilian counterparts there. Coming to our modeling activities, the Climate Modeling User Group is going into the second phase, which is great. You might have had some briefing already, maybe from Richard Jones on this one as well, earlier in this meeting. In particular, we have put a lot of emphasis on ECV science studies, so really looking at detailed studies that we would like to kick off. We will have a first discussion on this one in our upcoming annual meeting. It's a bit like your meeting here. We have that with all our science leads once a year. It's going to happen in November, and we will go through these different science cases there and discuss with the more observation-related science lead attendance there. Also interesting in terms of modeling update is, of course, that we are hosting CMIP since about a year and a bit. And I know there's now a liaison officer in C3S for CMIP activities, and discussions are already ongoing. I think CMIP has been very active, the project office, recently in preparation for the seventh CMIP phase. Part of this one was also to set up a number of task teams on particular subjects. And this is something that I would like to highlight here in terms of the ESA contribution to this one. Once we applied for becoming the host for CMIP, one of the feedback from the outgoing CMIP chair at the time was that one thing really missing in all this is the idea of having a systematic provision of forcing data sets. So we've been looking in some of our projects whether we can actually help with this one, and we will kick off 4 sort of pilots on this one in particular, one on ozone, one on greenhouse gas concentrations, sea surface temperature, and volcanic aerosol concentration and emissions. So this is coming. We are starting with this one now and adding to our already existing projects these additional tasks there. Coming to the part of combining the different climate data records, there's 2 things that we would like to do. The first one is to release the cross-ECV ITT. I think that's something that came very often from our community towards us, with many suggestions of what we could be doing there. Recently, or a year ago actually, meanwhile, we had the GCOS updated implementation plan, and as part of this one, a particular emphasis was put on looking into systems and cycles, so water, energy, and carbon cycle stuff. And later, actually, I think in May or June this year, there was a joint GCOS WCRP workshop, and the list that you see here on the right-hand side, I took from a sort of workshop summary presentation from Han Dolman, the outgoing GCOS chairman. It's not the complete list or the complete summary. This is still being approved and going through the different committees, but I got his approval to show this list here. It's by no means exclusive. The cross-ECV will not just cover this list that we got from this particular workshop. Obviously, it's a very valuable input for us, but we would also like to invite other proposals from our community that go beyond this list. The idea is to release this ITT later this year in November, after we had our discussion about cross-ECVs at the collocation meeting. It's a bit of a different thing. We want to place sort of somewhere between 2 to 4 contracts with a financial envelope of $500,000 to $2 million, and that really depends on what proposals are coming back. So we will have a mixture between very far advanced, let's say, proposals that might combine already quite a lot of partners, but at the same time also we would like to help sort of pilots to develop into something bigger. So this is to be updated very soon. Second one under this heading is the tipping points ITT that we are releasing. A year ago we had a week-long workshop with the International Space Science Institute in Bern, out of which we will have a compendium of review papers coming out. We are taking the particular angle of saying what is the usefulness of Earth observation data in terms of a tipping point research. This is going to come out at the beginning of next year. Again, it's a bit varied financial envelope here because we don't quite know what large-scale or small-scale projects we will receive. Also, interestingly, a tip MIP has been set up by Peak in Potsdam under the leadership of Ricarda Winkelmann. So that will also feed into the new assessment report number 7 under IPCC and CMIP considerations there. That's almost my last slide, and this is very relevant, obviously, for this meeting here. We've been working very closely with you, C3S here, in actually doing a respective mapping of our data sets between the Open Data Portal from CCI and the Climate Data Store from C3S. That's now in place. It was quite an effort to put this in place, but I think it's great, and it helps the transparency for our users here. And work to be continued. Also, we are thinking about and already talking to EUMETSAT about a similar setup with their data store there. Now, this is the summary of all the ITTs. It's going to be a very, very busy 2 years coming before we have to go back to our member states. So we are in the midst of releasing our invitations to tender, placing projects, and that's going to be a busy 2024-25. And this is not my last slide. Sorry, it doesn't move forward. This is just the announcement. If you're interested to come to our co-location meeting, 7th to 9th of November in our shiny, brand new conference center, which is going to be baptized with our event. So please do come along. It's a 2.5-day event, and happy to have any attendance from you. All the details are online, and we are finalizing the agenda as we speak. So that's me done. Thank you.
Susanne Mecklenburg from ESA. Thank you very much. We now talk about training C3S users, recent activities and exciting future developments. Chris Stewart, ECMWF.
So, indeed, I look forward to presenting you the concept of training at C3S, and then I'm going to give an overview of what we've done in the last year, and also the exciting new developments. Of course, the exciting really depends on you if you agree, but I remain optimistic. So, if I can get to the next slide, can we go to the next slide, please? Why do we do training at C3S? So as an operational service, elements like user support are essential, quality control are essential, and training is also essential. So training in the skills and the transfer of knowledge in the data, the products, and the tools that we provide. So training is one of the 7 pillars of our Copernicus user engagement strategy, as you can see in this slide. And it's intimately connected with these other pillars, and it's also intimately connected with the other service elements. So next slide, please. So more specifically, in training, we attempt to guide users to navigate them through their journey along the climate data value chain. Not necessarily from the beginning to the end, but wherever they may be and wherever they may like to go. For example, a data user at the beginning of the chain who wants to learn more about the data format, the metadata convention, or unit conversion to be able to progress to the next step and serve their users further down the data value chain. Conversely, a user, a high-level policymaker who wants to extract or understand the information content of our products and the knowledge that it can provide to impart wisdom on their constituents. We focus on that spectrum of the data value chain for which we have competence. So we don't include training on the satellite sensors, the in situ instruments. There are other organizations who do that, who are focused on that. Conversely, we don't provide a general training on Python programming or on climate science, because again, there are other entities who are very good at those aspects. We focus on the data, the products, the tools that we provide to maximize their impact. So next slide, please. Thank you. So how do we approach training? So we have online learning resources to enable you to learn at your own pace. If you don't want to be forced in a room and to be told to do something, you can do it in your own time. We do have training events if you do want to be forced into a room, or if you do want to focus your learning at a particular time that suits you. So we target specific user communities, but we also focus on wider groups. We have a train the trainers approach because we do have limited resources and we want to maximize the impact of those resources. And we also collaborate a lot to gain leverage from existing activities and avoid duplication of effort. Next slide, please. So who do we train? As I mentioned before, we work very closely with user engagement and other service elements, and very closely with user intelligence activities to understand exactly who our users are, who our existing users are, and who our new users are in an evolving landscape. We listen to their needs, and we target trainings in response to their requirements. And these trainings have categorized in these various different groups. And this is where I focus now on the huge amount of activities we've been doing in the last year and the ambitions we have in the future. So every year, there are large international events. We generally provide trainings in many of these events, such as last week, we had several training sessions at the European Meteorological Society. This week, there's the UNUSA Austria Symposium, Climate Symposium, where we are also providing training activities immediately following that symposium. Every year, there's EGU that we often support, and other international events that have taken place this year. We do a lot of joint activities, so in the context of the Wikio DIAS, joint trainings, Jupyter Notebook competitions, hackathons. This year also there was a series, we've supported the Google SDG Startups program with a series of webinars on climate, atmosphere trainings. We supported the EUMETSAT Data Visualization Workshop series. Also, we're collaborating with ESA in a Journey of a Pixel Masterclass at WCRP coming up shortly. We also contribute a lot to capacity building. So in October, we're supporting the WMO Regional Training Center in Israel with training on national adaptation plans to developing countries. Also FP Cup for Africa in October. Also ongoing discussions with CLIMSA on how we can support them with training. Another group, another category, I would call promoting products and highlighting key events. For example, we recently had a very anomalous July, many records broken. We're developing training resources on those records, how to visualize the data, how to reproduce some of the plots that were in the press releases. There was also this year we had a series of in situ data webinars. Also, and perhaps even most importantly, we do training in support to our partnerships. So specific trainings to specific users who want to use the data for specific applications. So, for example, we have discussions with the Union for the Mediterranean, European Investment Bank, COMAP, and the Italian Copernicus Mirror Program, European Association of Remote Sensing Companies, and in the future, we'll also support the National Collaboration Program. And the intention is to scale up our trainings with upcoming procurements that I'm going to present in the next slides as well. Next slide, please. But what do we actually do in our trainings? So we we design training activities and we use training materials that are focused on the target audience. So for technical data users who want to work with the actual NetCDF and GRIB data, we have, there's a lot of mention already so far on Jupyter Notebooks. So we have Jupyter Books, Jupyter Notebooks, potentially Jupyter Applications. And these are very good, open source, fully reusable resources that can be tailored to, you can take them, you can modify them as you wish, tailor them to your own needs. And we've developed a lot of these resources in the last year. So we published notebooks on observations, outgoing long-wave radiation, seasonal forecast verification, indices for the European State of the Climate Assessment, also inserted links to Jupyter material and bias correction, and we're developing new notebooks as well. We have a huge list of notebooks to be reviewed in our review process, and we also have a list of new developments. Next slide, please. So these notebooks are in a catalog which you can search. It's very easy to use. You can see the list of the notebooks. You can see the notebook itself in the middle, and then you can navigate around it fairly easily. These are linked also with the notebooks we developed for CAMS, and we would like also to integrate all of the ECMWF notebooks, so also the core-funded training activities in ECMWF. It'll be easy to go from one to the other. Next slide, please. Not everyone is, is a technical data user who wants to work with the actual data. We also have other learning resources, so e-learning resources. Last year, this year, we transferred them all onto a new Moodle-based learning management system. And in this learning management system, you find all of the ECMWF e-learning modules. So not just the ones on C3S, but also you can find modules on observations, on seasonal forecasting, on bias correction, model uncertainties. So these are all relevant, and they're all in the same place, so it's much more efficient. And because it's on a learning management system, you can track your progress through these modules. They can be inserted into a learning path, into online trainings, where we can also add a forum, and we can use all the tools provided by these learning management systems. Next slide, please. In addition to these, this year, from January to April, we launched a very massive open online course. And this was a course with 3 tiers, and C3S contributed a lot to this course. In podcasts on climate challenges and machine learning, in Jupyter Notebooks on how to use ERA 5 data with machine learning, e-learning modules. All of these materials are available still, and this had a huge impact. So we had over 9,000 participants, 28% completion rate for Tier 1 alone. And actually, for the entire MOOC, we had a well above average completion rate. In the future, we also have the ambition to launch a series of C3S-specific mini-MOOCs. These will not only focus on the key datasets provided by C3S, but also on the users and the partners that we work with. Next slide, please. So I'd like to mention some future developments, other future developments. So we have a new procurement to streamline and scale up our training activities. So this is an ITT on training events and resources. It is comprised of 2 parts. The organization of training events, including end-to-end promotion, communication with participants, logistics, follow-up, evaluation, everything related to the trainings, 36 days per year. And also the development and curation of learning resources. So this includes EarthKitizing our Jupyter Notebooks, so making them compatible with the new EarthKit library, the new C3S toolbox. We also want to include the creation of learning resources from scientific input that's provided. So the timeline, this has now closed. The evaluations are ongoing. Negotiations will take place in October, and the expected contract start is November. Next slide, please. Another very key activity that we launched this year, and this is to develop an agile mechanism to engage training experts to help us with activities. We're looking for, as this is an open call for experts to contribute either as an expert trainer in events, as a content creator, such as developing Jupyter notebooks, or as an instructional designer to design e-learning activities and resources. The process is to fill out a simple application. Applications are reviewed quarterly, and then should the need arise, we can engage experts from this roster. We already have quite a populated roster. It's accelerating, and we've already engaged a number of trainers in some activities. In addition to receiving a contract, a standard contract with the standard terms and conditions, experts shall have the opportunity to attend Train the Trainer events and collaborate collaborate and network with other trainers and ECMWF staff. Next slide, please. So this is actually my final slide. So just to summarize the key links and also the contact. So the C3S landing page, all the information on our training materials and our training activities can be found on the C3S landing page, C3S training landing page. If you would like to apply as a trainer, or please promote as widely as possible through your networks this opportunity to contribute as an expert trainer, the link is there. The Jupyter Notebook catalog, where you can freely obtain these resources, you can modify them. The link is you see the link there. Also our e-learning resources, our learning management system. And then finally, if you have any questions, then please contact me, and you find my email address at the bottom. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Stuart, and thank you for your patience with time management. Our next speaker is joining us online and will provide an update on Destination Earth, progress and perspectives. Many of our visitors need to make it on time to the train, and so there's quite a heavy load on your shoulders, Jorn, to keep your presentation within the time. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Here's your applause.
So thank you, good afternoon, and apologies for not being there in person. I was able to join the first day and a half of the event, but I had to be back in Bonn for this. So I want to pick up essentially where I did leave you at the last General Assembly in The Hague, and tell you where we've gotten with the Destination Earth so far, and how it connects to what you're doing in C3S, or we are doing. So as a reminder, the timeline, this is a 10-year perspective we're working on. We're in phase 1 at the moment, developing the initial system setup until the middle of next year. Then we'll start to operate certain elements of the system and continue to grow and develop it according to the Great Vision. I would also remind you that this is an initiative led by the European Commission, of course, but implemented jointly between the 3 entrusted entities, ESA, ECMWF, and EUMETSAT, for the different system components, the core service platform under ESA management, the digital twin and digital twin engine under ECMWF responsibility, and the data lake under EUMETSAT responsibility. I'm breezing through this a little bit because I have presented these basics last year, and I'm assuming that many of you in the room are aware of this is going on. Next slide, please. There are 2 priority digital twins that we are implementing at the moment. The first one is on weather-induced extremes to support disaster risk management activities. It has 2 implementation incarnations in a way, the continuous and the on-demand one. It will deliver global and high-resolution information with a time scale relevant for disaster management, that is 2 to 5 days ahead. And the continuous part is done by ECMWF internally, and the on-demand implementation is done by a consortium of national meteorological and hydrological services. I'm not going to go into much detail on this one in this venue, because I'm assuming that you'll be more interested on the climate adaptation twin, which is, as the name says, to support climate adaptation measures in Europe and globally. It aims at producing regular climate simulations and projections and multi-decadal timescales up until 2040 and 2050 at a high resolution, which in this case means 5 kilometers. At the moment, we're looking at the 10 kilometers to start the system, but 5 kilometer spatial resolution globally is the objectives here. This again is implemented under contract of ECMWF by a consortium led by the Finnish Research Center. Okay, next slide. I'll go into more detail here. I'd like to explain shortly what we understand in the under digital twin. What's new and what's special compared to what other simulation systems do. So there are 3 domains or dimensions in which we improve existing or on existing services. The first one is on quality, and that links to primarily the resolution. And the resolution, of course, then has a computational cost. And therefore, we're investing a lot in adapting models to run on high-performance computing machines in order to make that tractable. The other element is linking this to impacts all the way from the Earth system models, allowing users to inquire with the model, but also linking it to where the impact really counts. So that is flood models, air quality models, socioeconomic models, so energy systems, for example, where that are directly coupled to these operational or semi-operational, depends on how you interpret the term, systems. Interactivity is the third one, and that's arguably what is the most defining element of a digital twin. That's how most people understand it. So it's a system which you can query with certain choices that a decision maker has to make. So the often known as or referred to as what-if scenarios. So if I have a climate adaptation choice, I don't know, greening in a city or building flood control measures, what's the most cost-effective and solution that I have? And the digital twin, in a sense, aims at providing a tool or information system by which you can test those different options and understand their impact on your specific question. So next slide, please. Going back to the first one, the improved resolution, the IPCC currently operates on a 100-kilometer scale, more or less. And the digital twin, as I said, aims at a 5-kilometer scale. In this picture here, you don't see much of a difference, but on the next slide, when you zoom in, next slide, please. You can see that it does make a difference, and some of the in some regions that is expected to have a much change the results, in a sense, where there are storms that need to be resolved, or where there is topography that does merit to simulate this at a higher spatial resolution. That is, again, a massive step, as you can see, and as you may know. And it's, of course, comes with a lot of scientific questions also that are investigated in this development. Next slide, please. The point that I want to make here in this slide, I stole from Paco Dobles-Reyes at BSc, that it does make a difference. So resolving some of these processes at the higher resolution does actually tell a different story in terms of how the climate projection will behave. Again, it's still very much a scientific question of how you can make this work and reliable, but it is something that we are investing in with Destination Earth to make to explore for future systems. Next slide, please. So to be specific here on this slide, and I'm sorry for this being a bit text heavy, I said we're at phase 1. So far, I've explained more about the vision. What we're doing specifically here is to run these in phase 1, that is until the middle of next year. We'll run the global climate simulations with 2 different models, ICON and IFS. We will demonstrate the workflows, including the connections to selected impact sector models. We will demonstrate selected benefits with some users. Again, this is not an operational demonstration by any means, but it's really working with selected users to understand how they would be able to benefit and what their expectations would be. And that's something that we will do by the middle of next year. So there's a number of contracts by which we're implementing this at the moment. We're starting to develop the quality assessment framework for Destination Earth overall. That is, of course, something that needs to be in place in order to make this actually used for decisions. I also mentioned that briefly in passing before. We're investing a lot on deploying these existing models efficiently on the new computing infrastructure in the Euro HPC systems, starting with Lumi and Mare Nostrum. Next slide, please. There are a few innovations in this whole workflow that we're investing. I mentioned that I'm not going to talk about all these boxes because I'll be running out of time very quickly. But I do want to point out this novel concept of streaming data, which will allow users or user applications to not only work with stored output data, like what you get from CMIT today, but you can actually, during the run of the climate DT of that model, in a way subscribe to a certain data stream and work with the full model resolution. So interface the data stream and hook your application into that data stream as the model is running, which will allow you much more detailed information beyond what will be possible to store. And that's something that is implemented and tested at the moment. Next slide, please. I then now want to finish by mentioning two specific use cases where we're trying to demonstrate how this will actually impact. One that I picked is the one on energy system. This is implemented by a consortium led by DLR. Here, the motivation is, of course, as you know, that renewable energy use needs to increase or is increasing, which makes the energy system much more vulnerable to variability, or the energy system has to deal with that higher variability linked to the renewable energy resources. And the idea is to use Destination Earth projections, in this case, to support the planning of the energy system. So the adequacy assessment of transmission systems in Europe. Next slide, please. So this is being implemented at the moment. So there is an energy system model coupled to the output of the digital twin, understanding how these connections, the lines on this map, are the links between different productions and consumers, and you can simulate how the load on these connections changes in the changing climate setting, and you can then start learning and understanding the adequacy. There is a big interest, a large interest in transmission system operators on this sort of application, and they're very happy to work with us on developing this. Next slide, please. And this is just an initial animation showing how that is moving, and it actually does change over time. Next slide, please. A second example is the one on urban heat, where we're looking at the climate projection, how that would change the exposure of people, humans in European cities, or to adapt their planning and see that they can run scenarios. This is where users are actually defining certain adaptation scenarios. And these are then simulated by urban climate model connected to the digital twins. Or in this case, the one on climate also. Next slide, please. Again, this is in principle, the vision is to make something like this. This could become a service in principle. At the moment, we're only demonstrating to what extent this will improve on what's currently possible. And of course, this builds very much on developments and services of Copernicus already. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. And I want to finish with a plug for our user exchange meeting planned for November 13 and 14, which you're all invited to, where we present in much more detail where we stand with the developments and are starting to engage a user community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorn. And I also thank the two other speakers once more, Susanne and Stuart. We have reached the final session of our GA, and that will consist of two sets of concluding remarks, starting with the Deputy Director of C3S, Samantha Burgess.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and well done. We've made it. 2.5 days of phenomenal talks. Really interesting discussions in the corridor as well. If my slide deck can appear at some point, that would be awesome. I'm deviating somewhat from the majority of the discussion that we've had over the last 2.5 days to tell a story. Next slide, please. The story that I'd like to tell is of a gentleman that I met last week who is extraordinarily inspirational. So his name, which I'm not going to pronounce very well, is Benjamin van Bunderen Roberex, and apologies to all the Belgian, Flemish and Dutch speakers in the room. Anyway, Ben is 16 and he's a climate activist. He became a climate activist at age 11 when he has attended every single climate strike since then. In 2021, he was impacted directly by a friend being washed away in the flooding that impacted Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. So in that event, 39 people lost their lives in Belgium. And Ben has worked tirelessly with a huge number of other people to create a campaign for climate justice for Rosa, his friend. In terms of the total flooding, 220 people were impacted in that one extreme event. However, change is happening. So on the 15th of June, the European Commission and the European Parliament and the European Council voted to have a European annual day to commemorate the victims of climate change. That day is this 15th of July. So on the 15th of July this year, Ben and friends commemorated Rosa and the other 38 victims in Belgium by projecting their names in Brussels. So, why am I telling you this? It's because it's very easy to focus on the data and what the data is telling us and to lose sight of the impact. However, I think we're all struggling with this of where is the line that we draw to communicate effectively and clearly on the science so that people can act. And hearing about Ben's story, although it's very emotional, is also very hopeful. Next slide, please. So on a lighter note, I really value the discussions and the huge knowledge exchange that we've had over the last 2.5 days. And there's two quotes that have stuck with me. One from Peter Berg, the meteorologists eat petabytes for breakfast. I think that will stay with me for a long time. And the second one was from Peter Thorne in the Climate Intelligence Workshop yesterday, where he articulated that the efforts that the C3S team have delivered over the summer to communicate the evidence of climate change is a service to science. And that will also stay with me for a very long time. So moving on to the next slide, which is also my final slide, we've learned a huge amount about what C3S and the contractor community has achieved and is achieving. And these are the highlights for me of where we're going looking forward. So in terms of ERA 6, we've had some challenges. Why are you producing ERA 6 already? ERA 5 is so great, it's so useful. There's 10,000 citations for Hans's paper describing the methodology of ERA 5. But the reality is that ERA 6 also benefits from 1,000 person years of effort. So there's 8 years between these cycles. In terms of the 8 years, there's about 100 people that work in ECMWF in the research department, plus all the C3S team, plus the contractor team, plus all the people rescuing the data, recovering the data, restoring the data, and implementing the data to make it viable to improve our model system and data assimilation. So ERA 6 is going to be extraordinarily exciting. In addition to that, we've got the IPCC Atlas, so we saw that presentation yesterday, and that's really going to be an incredibly useful tool for people to engage with climate projections, with reanalysis, to really understand climate risk where they are. There's a huge number of applications, and we've just really had a snapshot of those applications. And the ones that I'm really excited by is, unlocking this financial flows and understanding risk associated with financial investments with EIB. We haven't heard too much about EEA, this General Assembly, but the work there on the Climate Adapt is also very, very exciting. And of course, the Thematic Energy Hub that was launched yesterday and the energy services around that. We've also got the launch of the CDS Mark II and all the open source software like EarthKit that will support and underpin that. It's all very, very exciting. I've heard from so many people in the room that they're really excited by the National Collaboration Programme and the opportunities and collaborative opportunities it offers the National Meteorological Services. So that's great to hear, and we really look forward to collaborating with you on this. Finally, there's been some discussion on climate attribution. And we're still figuring out what that means for C3S, how we build on the science, where the science is at, what works for C3S as an operational service, and what builds upon what the National Meteorological Services agencies are doing already. So that conversation is ongoing, but expect our ITT to be launched very soon. And, sorry, I do have one more slide. And if we can go to the final slide, because the climate monitoring is a part of the program that I lead, and I can say with almost 100% conviction, 2023 is the warmest year in human history. This figure is, or the data is ERA 5, obviously, from the latest data point is 10th of September, and you can see how far above September is from the rest of September's ever till 1940. So at the moment, at the end of August, we were 100th of a degree behind 2016, the warmest year. But with numbers like that, unless we have a deep freeze for 2 months, it is going to be the warmest year. In the comms workshop this morning, Rafa was talking about what would be the headline for the press release. I think we're going to be saying warmest year ever for 2023 until we get to 2024. Obviously. Anyway, I'll leave it there, and I'll hand over to Carlo for some final remarks. But yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been a fantastic workshop, and we value your commitment and engagement and discussion.
Thank you very much, Samantha, including for your heartfelt remarks at the beginning of your presentation. Right after Carlo, I have 30 seconds of practical information, and then it's a wrap. Carlo, give him an applause.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Is it working?
No. Do you want this one?
Sure, or...
Can we have a handheld, please? Come forward.
Yes. Oh, now, is it working now? Okay, good. Good, thank you. So actually, I read a paper last week that came out looking at the way scientists read scientific papers, and now the way of reading scientific paper changes over the career. So apparently when you're a PhD, you read everything, and when you are after the second postdoc, you just read the abstract and the conclusion, and at times the methods. So because of that, I decided to give the index of this General Assembly, and now I'm doing the conclusion, so probably I have you here. But actually the conclusion are those that Sam mentioned. What I'm going to say is just thank you everyone. Before doing that, still on papers, yesterday was the 150th anniversary of the Royal Meteorological Society, and the Quarterly Journal in particular, and Florence Rabier, our Director General, was there, and they were joking that ERA 5 paper probably put the impact factor one notch higher because of the impact he's having. But more seriously, has been cited about 10,000 times now, and has been now one of the 25 most influential papers ever published on the quarterly journals, which is quite an achievement considering that the first one is probably the Rosby paper, where everyone refers to. So really, really, really impressive. And the fact that this is one of the output of this program, I think, is very telling. So before saying thank you to many people, there is an obligation I need to do, is also written on the program, and is the poster prize. Right. So we had a proper group of experts who walked down and up and down the alley, looking at different posters. And it's not just the scientific content, it's really how they appear as well, and also how rigorously compliant with the brand guidelines they are. So after this careful analysis, we concluded that poster number 20 on the land hydrology and cryosphere ice sheet and ice shelves won the prize. So I don't know if there is anyone from the OCD here in the room. There you are. Well done. And now I really conclude. So I just, I think it's been a very, very good General Assembly. Now we have a good track record, and every year we learn something and it gets more interesting. And it's also possible because we have great people, starting from our local organizing committee, Chess Globe in particular. They really engaged with us at the end of last year, the city mayor here. But I really want to thank the C3S General Assembly Organizing Committee. So this time there were multiple people involved, and in particular, Chiara, San, and Annabelle, who have done a really great job. So thank you very much for that. I would like also to thank GOPA, and Alex, Chloe, and Christine for their work. It would have been impossible without you. So thank you very much. Thank you also to AV team. And there are two people I want to thank before leaving space for Ali. One is Francesca. So Francesca has been impossible. It would have been really impossible to organize this event without Francesca. So I think she deserves an applause on her own. And last but not least, Ali. Now we have a track record of working with you. Last year you've done a fantastic job, and this year again, it's just putting the entire conference to a different level. So thank you very much. And thank you all for your participation.
Many thanks, Carlo, and thank you for the invitation to moderate. Always a pleasure to work with you. In particular, I thank Francesca and Chiara for the collaboration, as well as the fantastic team of GOPA. Allow me to also thank all the speakers, including for their patience with time management, which also goes for everyone who asked a question. Thank the AV team, and thank all of you. And in order to keep the quality going up and up of this event, we kindly ask that you take the survey on paper, which is at the registration desk. Upon completion, you receive a prize. If you are online, then look for the link under the YouTube stream. Thank you very much, and have a good trip back home.